Hello, my name is Kenny, and we're going to be running through a tutorial on how to create your own basic home lab running Active Directory using Oracle's VirtualBox. We'll also be adding some users using a PowerShell script. All of the links that we're going to be using today I'll put under the description below, so feel free to take a look at that when you want to do this on your own. Just wanted to give a kind of a broad overview of what we're going to be creating today. Of course, we're going to be downloading and installing the Oracle's VirtualBox to be using our virtual machines. After that's installed, we're going to be downloading the Windows 10 ISO and also the Server 2019 ISO, which we're going to use to install the two operating systems on two separate virtual machines. So one is going to be for the domain controller and one is going to be on the client one over here. We're going to first create our first virtual machine, which will be our domain controller. So the domain controller is going to have two network adapters. One is connected to the outside internet, and one is going to be connected to an internal private network that the clients over here on a separate virtual machine are going to connect to. We're going to be assigning IP address in the internal network. The external network will automatically get IP addressing from the home network that we're using. So for me, it'll be my home network, but for you, it'll be yours. After we have the IP addressing set up, we're going to name the server, and then we're going to install Active Directory to create our domain. And then we're going to configure that and then route so that the clients on the private network here will be able to reach the internet through the domain controller. Basically, domain controller is we're going to install Active Directory on the domain controller and also create our domain, which we're going to configure and route so that the clients will be able to connect through the private internal network and reach the internet. Next, we're going to set up DHCP on the domain controller so that when we create our virtual machine for our client, it'll automatically get an IP address. And then the last thing we'll do on the domain controller before we create our client is we're going to run a PowerShell script so that it can automatically create 1,000 users in Active Directory. After we create the users, we're going to create another virtual machine, which we will install Windows 10, and then this virtual machine here will then connect to the internal network. We're going to name this machine, of course, client 1 as we have it here, and then we're going to allow it to join into the domain that we created on the domain server. Once we do that, this will have the power to log into one of the accounts that we've made using the PowerShell script, and then that is basically it. This altogether will kind of simulate a small organization where they have multiple clients or multiple employees to log in using their credentials and access a private network, which will then have access to the outside internet. And this will also kind of go over how Active Directory works, a very low level understanding of Active Directory to beginners. So let's get started. I'm going to download VirtualBox here. I have a Windows computer, so I'm just going to download Windows, and let's set this up. I'm just put next, next, and next, and next, and install. Very nice. Oops. And then sure, let's just open it up too, might as well. Cool. So I'm just going to minimize that from now, just so that we can get everything set up. What we're going to do is also download the extension pack. This will help us down the line, so go ahead and we'll click on that, reinstall it. Feel free to scroll all the way down and press agree, and we should be good. So that's it for that. We'll move on to the next one, which is either or the Windows 10 server, whatever you like. We're just going to download the ISO version here. Make sure it is the ISO download, and then of course whatever bit you're using. It seems like this is only 64-bit. We'll download that. That's going to take a bit of time. and then we'll also download the Windows 10 installation media. We'll click on download now, and then that will also download as well. Since this is taking some time, we'll start off with the Windows 10. We'll agree to terms. Alright, and then of course we want to create an ISO file, so click on this one here, and then this is fine unless you're using a different window. Then of course change this to Windows 10, click on next, and then we're going to go for the ISO file here. And to make it a little bit easier to find, I'm just going to put it into our desktop here, and save. So this is going to take some time. We can move on to the next one. So we'll just wait for this to happen. It seems like the ISO file was already downloaded, and we'll just move it to the desktop. In the meantime, I'm just going to find our ISO file. Here is the ISO file for server 2019. So let's actually rename this to server 2019. And then I'm just going to throw this onto our desktop here, just to make it easier for us to take a look at later on. Perfect. So we'll finish here, and it appeared down here, which is perfect. So this one right here, we'll just put Windows 10 just to make it easier to understand. Perfect. So now we're all done here. Go ahead and open up VirtualBox. We're going to click on New. We're going to name this DC for our domain controller. This will be our first virtual machine. What we're going to do here, you can actually select the ISO image from here. If it doesn't show up onto your browse, you can always click on others and then route to wherever your server 2019 ISO was at. We'll actually skip the unintended installation and click on next, and then depending on how much resource you have on your computer, you can adjust this to as follows. I'm just going to put it to 4 gigs of RAM just to make it easier for me to use, and I'm going to use 4 CPUs just because it'll be faster. But if you don't have the resources, then it's perfectly fine. You don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to press on next. We're going to create a virtual hard disk with the standard, and then just click on finish. Now we have successfully created our virtual machine, but there's a lot of things that we have to configure first. So what you're going to do, we're going to right click and go to settings, and here we're going to switch over to advanced, and then the shared clipboard and drag and drop, we're going to switch that over to bidirectional, and this just lets us be able to kind of bring things back and forth, copy and paste if we need to, from our host computer to our virtual machine. What we're going to do next is let's go to network, and if you looked at the network topology that was talked about earlier, we're going to have 2 networks here. One is going to be internet facing, and another one is actually going to be the internal network. So to do that is exactly what I just did. We go to the second tab for adapter 2, click on enable network adapter, and change this to internal network. And once we've added this setting, we are all set. We're going to power it on now by double clicking, and it'll show up a little window here, which is perfectly fine. And then this will pop up here. So what we're going to do here, we're going to click on next and install now. And we're going to make sure that we are able to put the desktop experience. If you were to just do the blank one, it'll just be command line prompts or just command line interface. So we definitely want to do the desktop experience so that we have a GUI to work with. So we're going to click on this one, and we'll hit next, and we'll accept the license terms and hit next. We're going to custom, just so that we can use the unallocated space, and then we'll install. And I'll go ahead and speed this up for you so that you don't have to wait for this to go. Alright, so it's just going to restart. Alright, and here, don't press anything when that shows up. Alright, so now that we're on this customized settings page here, it's just going to prompt us to make a password for the domain controller. And we're just going to make it really simple. We're just going to do password1 with a capital P. And then we're going to actually recycle this password throughout all of our passwords that we need to use, just to make things simple and easy to remember. So we'll just click on that and finish. And of course with this one, it does say Control Delete. However, if you do try to do that, you'll actually be pushing Control Delete on your host computer and not actually within the virtual machine. So a couple ways you can do this. You can go all the way up to Input, Keyboard, and then it'll tell you Control Delete up here. You can just click on that, or it'll say your shortcut is Host Delete, which is usually on a keyboard the Control on the right side of the keyboard, and then Delete. So you can always do that to unlock. And then we'll use the password that we just put in to log into the VM. We'll exit this out and we'll just minimize this for now. So the VM right now is doing okay. It's a little bit laggy, and also, as you can notice with the screen, no matter what I do to expand it, it is not going with the expanded, so the window is not expanding at all. It stays the same resolution. To fix that, we're actually going to go to Devices and insert Guest Additions CD image here, and this will actually insert the expansion that we downloaded earlier with VirtualBox. Once you clicked on that, you can open up the File Explorer, navigate to this PC, and you'll see this VirtualBox Guest Additions here. We're going to double click that, and we're going to navigate to the one that ends with AMD64 and double click that to start installing the guest additions. We'll click next, 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 and it'll install. Alright, so we're just going to manually reboot later, and then we're going to actually shut this down. Now that we shut it down, we're just going to boot it back up. We're only doing this because sometimes we can run into an error when we or just let it reboot on its own and then it doesn't work. And hopefully after we sign in and everything kind of loads in, we'll be able to reorganize the resolution. And if it doesn't work out, oh, there he goes. Just took a little bit of resizing, and we'll go there. Perfect. The next steps here, we're going to go and open up our settings, and we'll move over. Let's see, where's the network? Here we go. We'll move it to the network, and then we'll go to change the adapter settings. So here we're actually going to rename the network connection so it's easier to identify later on. As you can see, there's two networks here. One is still identifying, the other one is network. So for this one, let's take a look. We'll open up status and we'll go to details. And right here, it's giving us a 169.254.106.157. So this one actually is the network that is automatically given if it's unable to be given an IP address due to DHCP. And of course, we don't have DHCP set up yet, so the computer will automatically give a IP address that has a 169.254 starting address. So this one is actually our internal network. So we're actually going to name this our internal network. So to rename, we'll just go here. And let's see, let's make it simple. We'll go for internal, which also means that this one is our internet facing network, and you can actually see if you look here, our IP is a 10.0, and this is the network that you'll be able to connect to the internet from here. So we'll actually rename this internet. And let's see, let's do internet. Perfect. And now that we have identified our two networks, we can move on to the next step. For the internal network, we're going to assign an IP address, and then you'll locate where the IPv4 is, double click on that, and then we're going to assign it to an IP address. And if you look at the network topology, we're actually going to assign it a 172.16.0.1 with a subnet of 255.255.255. For the DNS server, we're actually going to use itself as the DNS server. So we can either do one of two things. We can either put the same IP address as what we're assigning it to, or you can use the loopback address, which is the 127.0.0.1. Either of these work because they all do the same thing. We'll just kind of leave it as is. Anyways, from here, we'll click OK, and we'll X this out. And we'll actually go to our system, and we're going to rename our PC. Here we go. Just because our name for the PC is a little bit long and we're not really able to identify it, we're going to rename this DC for domain controller. And now we're going to restart the PC. Let's continue and just let it reboot back up. Alright, now that it's booting back up, we'll just let it do its thing. Now we're going to start off with adding our Active Directory domain services. And to do that is the server manager that pops up on startup. We're going to navigate to where it says add roles and features. We're going to press next, next, and this is the server that we'll be using it from. So we'll click on, or it's already highlighted, so we'll go next. And then we're actually going to highlight Active Directory domain services. This is what we really want. Be careful not to click on anything else. So we'll check marks this. We'll add the features and we'll hit next, 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 and install. Now that it's finished, we're going to close this, and then you'll notice a little notification here that has a post-deployment configuration. So now we actually have to promote this server to a domain controller. We'll click on that, and we're actually going to add a new forest. So we're going to add a domain, mydomain.com, just to kind of follow the steps of Jasmata Core. We'll click on next. Alright, and then now these checks out. We're going to add a password here, or else it won't let us move on to the next. We'll just make it simple. We'll just do the same password, capital P password with a 1 at the end, and then we'll click on next, and then we'll go next, and then we'll click on next, and we'll go next, next. Perfect, and then we'll click on install. So I was gonna say that it's gonna be restarted. We're gonna close this, and then we'll wait for it to restart. Nice. We'll now see my domain/administrator, which is dope because we just created our domain. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna log back in with our beautiful strong password. We're going to start off with adding an organizational unit to our Active Directory. So to get there, we're going to, I just minimized the server manager. I'm going to click on the start menu. We'll go to Windows Administrative Tools, open the drop down, and we'll go to Active Directory Users and Computers. You'll see if we open up our domain, There's a bunch of stuff here, and you can see that our domain controller DC is set up. So what we're going to do here, we're going to actually add a new organizational unit, and this is going to be for the admins. So let's do this. We're actually going to uncheck this. In a real world setting, we will not, but because this is a lab, I'm going to check this off. So I'm gonna press OK, and we created a folder for our organizational unit. So now we're going to click onto the admin, and we are going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and right click. We're going to do new, and we're going to do new user. So this one, we can just use your name. My name is Kenny, and last name Ho. And our login, we're just going to do very basic login information. So usually in a organization for admins, they usually just have a dash, and then it's usually the first initial of the first letter of your first name and then your last name, so K and then Ho, and then we'll click on next here. Password same as usual, and then we're going to click on password never expires, just so that we don't have to worry about changing this again later on, and then finish. And now we have our first user. However, even though we did say that this is in the admins, he's not actually admin. So we're actually going to right click, go to properties, and we're going to click member of. Here we're going to click on add, and we're going to go for domain admin. And what you're going to do, check the names, and domain admins is auto-corrected to that object, and click on OK. Now he is added to the domain admins, and then we're going to press apply and OK. So now we can actually, if we wanted to, exit out, and we're going to sign out. And now, since we had given ourselves admin, we can actually go to click other users, sign in with our admin credentials, and we have now access to the domain controller since we given ourselves domain admin access. So now we got the Active Directory set up. We are now going to configure or set up our NAT. So same thing as usual, we're going to go to add roles and features, click next, next, and this is the domain, of course, next, and this one is called remote access for some odd reason. We want to make sure that we click on routing here to get the routing for direct access on VPN, and also routing here. Click on next, 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 and install. So now we got that added in. We're going to go to tools here, navigate to the routing and remote access. So we're actually going to configure the domain controller. You can see that it has a downwards arrow and kind of looks sad. So we're going to right click and press on configure and enable routing. Then we're going to set up the NAT, not the VPN here. And then unfortunately, so something here is actually supposed to pop up, and it's supposed to show our network interfaces with our internal network and network. So unfortunately this is not showing up for some reason, so we're going to cancel this, X out, and then we're going to do that one more time. Now it will show up, yep, just like that. Don't know why it does that, but it does that. Anyways, so what we're going to do, we'll click on the internet, press on next, and finish. So now you see, if I don't know if I can really zoom up on here or not, but you'll see that there's an up arrow now. We're going to set up DHCP now. So we can go ahead and minimize this if we want. We'll go to add roles again, and we're going to do the same thing. We can click on next, and now we're going to click on DHCP server, add the features, next, 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 and install. Alright, now the DHCP is installed, we'll go back to the tools up here in the top right and go open DHCP. You'll notice IPv4 and IPv6 has a downwards arrow. They're looking kind of sad, so what we're going to do here is we're going to actually click and right click on IP4 and we're going to add a new scope. So what we're going to do here, since our scope is going to be from 172.16.0.100 to 200, we're actually going to just write that in to make things easier to understand, so we know what actually is our scope. So that is the name that we're going to be putting, and we're going to click next, and this is where we're going to put the beginning and end. So exactly what we talked about, 172.16.0.100, and then the end is the same thing but with 200, and we're going to bump this up to a 24, so our submask is 255, 255, 255. We don't need to really worry about exclusions or anything, so we'll click on next. So this is the least duration. It's not really important, but this is basically how long that client, when they are in the domain, they are assigned an IP address, and it lasts for about 8 days, and that's pretty standard. So we'll click on next, and we definitely want to configure the options now. So what we're going to do for the router, the default gateway, we're actually going to use itself. We're going to add that in. We'll move on to the next one, and you'll see the parent domain is mydomain.com. So we're actually going to be adding the IP address of the domain controller. Not sure why this popped up, but we'll be adding that in, and we'll just remove this actually. Click on this. We don't really care about the Win server right now, and we're going to activate the scope now and click finish. So now we have to authorize it first and then refresh. There we go. Now we got the check arrow here. Everyone is happy. We have the scopes all set up and we're good to go. What we're going to do now is we're going to make a small little configuration to our internet browsing. We're going to click on configure this local server here, and now we're actually going to scoot over to where it says IE Enhanced Security Configuration. So Internet Explorer, we're going to turn this off completely so that we don't have them screaming at us when we're trying to get the PowerShell script later. So now what we're going to do, we're going to boot up Internet Explorer, and we're going to paste this link into the URL to get the folder with the text file with the 1,000 names, as well as the PowerShell script that we're going to use to basically automate and get all of those names into as users in our Active Directory. So I'm going to put the link in the description below so that you can follow along using that folder as well. I'm just going to press enter now, and then it's going to ask if you want to open or save, and we want to save as so that we can put this onto the desktop. Go ahead and click on save, and then you can go ahead and close this now. Once this folder pops up, go ahead and extract the content. So let's drag this back onto the desktop and let's double click. So now you'll see a few things. The PowerShell script that we're going to be using is this one right here. It's one_create_users. And the text file that we're going to use is names right here. So and I'll go over what the PowerShell script does later on in the video when we do pop it up in a bit. But for now, let's go ahead and double click on the names, and then you'll see a bunch of names that pops up in this folder or in this file. And this is about 1,000 names. You can honestly just make this yourself, but to make it easy for you, I just provided you with the file. What we're going to do, we're going to add our own name to make it a little bit more realistic so that we can kind of put ourselves in this fake organization, right? Just make sure that when you do this, that you save first before you exit out. and then we'll move on to the next step. This is the part where we're going to be creating a bunch of users using PowerShell and putting them into our Active Directory. Go ahead and click on Windows on the Start menu, and we'll go to Windows PowerShell, and then we're going to open up the PowerShell ISE, but not clicking on left clicking, but you're going to right click on it and then run as administrator. We're going to open a file and open, navigate to the desktop, and we'll click on first one, create users, open it up, and it'll pop up a PowerShell. If you don't really care about what this PowerShell does, then feel free to skip ahead. I'm just going to do a little bit of explanation just because I thought it was very helpful when I first did it, when I listened to Josh Madakor doing it. By listening to how he explained it, it made sense after doing it a few times. Line 2, it sets password 1 as the variable for passwords for the users, and then for line 3 it gets the contents from the name file that we have in that folder and uses that for the variable for the user's first and last names list, which is pretty nice. It gets all the contents congregated all together. So line 6 converts the plain text passwords, which was password 1 with a capital P, into a secure string. And then line 7 here, it creates a new organizational unit named users in the Active Directory, and it sets it to not be protected by accidental deletion. Line 9 and below, it's a loop where 1, it reiterates the variable users first last list and splitting it into a couple variables here. So it splits the first portion of the name to first name and then lowercasing it if it was uppercase, and then it did the same thing for the last name, the second part, to splitting it into a last name and then lowercasing it as well. And then the username, this new variable, is using the first and last name or first initial of the first name variable was split into, adding that into the last name from the second variable that I created last. So let's say, for example, my name, Kenny Ho, is in the list of names that we added in. What this will do is, 1, it's going to take my name, Kenny Ho, with Kenny space Ho. It's going to first split it to Kenny and then lowercase that in this first part here, and then the last name Ho, they're going to lowercase it here and then place it into last. This username is, 1, taking the first letter of my name, or of my first name, Kenny, which is K, and then adding that to my last name, Ho, and also making sure that is lowered. So the username in this case would be K Ho. And then line 13, of course, is just printing out the username into the console with different colors, with the background black and the foreground color cyan. 15 is just adding more information to the new users using new add user with all the information that we've had previously. So account password they put as capital P password 1, given name is Kenny, surname Ho, and then it just punches in all of the variables that they've already collected for each user that we put in. What I'll do here, I'll try to press play and open the script, but it actually won't let me because, 1, it's saying that it is not digitally signed. You got this from the internet, it's unsafe. So we're actually going to set execution policy to unrestricted, so that, and then it's going to pop up this security saying that, are you sure? That's a lot of security risk, and yes, right, we're just doing whatever to kind of show an example. So what you also notice too is that to get the contents of the name file, it has a dot here, which means we have to be in the same directory as the name file. So we'll actually go to the PowerShell console and change directory to the directory that has the name file, which is our desktop, and then this ADPS master. So we'll change it with an absolute path. Our current directory should be this folder here with the name text file. And then now we can actually press play and let the PowerShell script work its magic. So we're going to press play, and then we'll just run it once, and then you'll see that it's creating all this users. While it's actually doing this, we can actually do a nice quick check with the Active Directory, since this is putting users in a new organizational unit, users here. We can check, actually, if we open up the server manager and then go to tools and go to Active Directory users and computers, you'll see a new folder named users from the PowerShell script. And then if we look over here, there's all the users that is currently putting in, and it looks like the PowerShell is done. And let's actually try to find our name. So let's go Kenny. Let's just go Kenny. Let's see what they find. So there's two Kennys here. There's Kenny McCreaney and Kenny Ho. This one says first name and last name. There you go. And if I were to do Kenny Ho, there you go. Perfect. K Ho, member of domain users. So that's pretty cool. It shows you basically all of the users here, and you may have noticed that in this PowerShell script you may experience these arrows here, and that's just because it probably shared the same last name and also first initial, so it just couldn't make another one, which is perfectly fine, especially for this. It's like not a huge deal. So now that we have seen that it's created a new organizational unit called users back in the Active Directory, we're going to minimize the whole domain controller, and we're going to create a new VM for the client. So we're going to put client 1 for the new VM, and then we'll just make sure that is Windows 10, and we'll click on next here. Same thing here. I'm just going to give it 4 gigs of RAM and also 4 cores, just so that things can process faster, and just click finish. Perfect. Same thing that we did for the domain controller. We're just going to do the same thing for the client. We're going to right click, go to settings, go to advanced, and make sure that these are bidirectional. And for the network, we're going to make sure that we're using the internal network. We're going to spin it up. So we'll turn it on. And right here is asking us to insert the bootable medium. We're going to select the Windows 10 ISO that we downloaded in the beginning and mount and retry. All right, so here we're going through the process of installing Windows. Okay, perfect. So now we don't have a product key, so we're just going to click on I don't have a product key. Making sure we select Windows 10 Pro, Windows Home, and I don't know if Education has it, but they don't have the capabilities of connecting to a domain, but Windows Pro does. So we'll do Windows Pro, click on next, accept the license, and click on next. Custom install, use the unallocated space, and then we'll get everything set up for installation. So now it's going to restart after the installation, and I'll probably do that a few times. Just make sure you don't tap anything or press any keys. Feel free to kind of set this up to where you live. We'll just go for the US since we're here. US layout. We're going to skip a second keyboard layout. Make sure when they ask you how you want this to be set up that you click on personal use, and then you click on next, and then right here it'll ask you to make a make a Microsoft account. You don't need to. You can just press on offline account here and don't have to go through all that process. Feel free to click on limited experience so that you don't have to worry about making a whole Microsoft account to do this. We're going to name this user, and we'll just leave the password blank. Very nice. And then just skip this. You don't have to do this, but I'll just turn this off just in case. and skip. So now that we have created the VM, it's going to run through this process as it does for all of the Windows startups. Now we have our user. Almost done. We're going to now do a couple things here. We're going to rename this PC, and we're also going to connect it to the domain. Since this is just like a standalone VM right now, it is actually not connected to the domain controller yet. So we won't be able to log in using the internal network that we want to. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to System, and instead of clicking on this Rename PC, we can actually connect to the domain if we go up here where it says Rename this PC Advanced. So we'll click on this, and not here, but actually here is where we can rename the PC. And feel free, we're going to rename this PC as Client 1, and then the domain, we're going to put our domain that we created earlier, mydomain.com, click OK, and then the user, we're going to add in whichever kind of user that you wanted to do. I could, let's say for example, the admin account that I created earlier, I could use this with password 1 and log in. I can also, I don't know, use the user that the PowerShell script created for me, or any of the users in that script that was created and added to that organizational unit. So let's say, for example, I want it to just be a basic user. And then this is the password, of course, capital P, password 1, enter. And then after it loads, it'll say welcome to the domain. And then it's going to ask to restart, and then it's going to restart everything. Click on restart now and let it restart. Now that we have restarted, let's actually leave this here, and we're going to go back to our domain controller. Left here is domain controller. Let's log back in, and let's minimize this, and let's go to our DHCP. So here you'll see address leases, boom, Client 1. So this is actually the VM that we're using right now on the right, and since we've already connected it to the domain, they have assigned, the DHCP has assigned this address to this VM that we have on. You can also see, let's say, let's go to users and computers, right? Let's see, computers here. Before you didn't see anything, but now you can see Client 1 is connected. And then let's say, for example, if I all of a sudden want to delete this, right? Boom. This VM won't be able to connect to the domain. And then I'll have to go through that whole process of connecting to the domain, again through the settings. This just basically says this computer here, this VM, is connected to the domain, and I can use this VM to log in to any user that is in this folder. So now we're actually going to do that. We're going to click on other user. We're going to go, let's say, my basic user, and log in. And now this is the first time we're booting up with this user, so it's going to do the whole rundown again, and bam, we're in. So now we're running as a basic user, Kenny Ho. And let's say, let's command prompt this. As you can see, it says users in kho. If I write in who am I, we're connected to my domain, and we're using the user kho. And that is the end of the tutorial. We have finally created the client who has access to the internal network to connect to, and has access to the domain, which can connect to any of the users here. If this were to sign out, we can connect to any of the users with their username and password. And we've also created a domain controller that has a 2 NIC, one for internal and one for the internet, which will also act as DNS to forward traffic from the client here to the controller to the internet, and then bring it back in. To kind of give a visual, I have here the network topology, where we've created the domain controller here with server 19. We created with 2 NICs, one for NAT to connect to the internet with DHCP, and one for an internal network here, which we set up. We also added in our Active Directory with domain services into the domain controller, as well as a NAT and routing, and also the DHCP with a scope of 172.16.0.100 all the way to 200, and these will be assigned to any of the clients who are in access of the domain when they log into their user. We also created another VM that acted as a client who was able to connect to the domain and sign in with their users that we created using PowerShell. Feel free to try this on your own. Comment down below if you have any criticisms or just comments of this video. I would love to have some feedback if there is any, because the more I know, the more I'll learn. But thank you for watching, and hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you so much.